right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I see we have almost 200 students joining us this afternoon. My name is Jeremy Spoor. I'm the Assistant Director of ISSS, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Donna Steinfeld. She's the Senior Assistant Director of ISSS. So we're going to take you through the kind of overview here of OPT and the timeline and the process of how to apply for OPT, which will be opening up soon in IPEN. You can put your questions in the chat, or no, in the Q&A, not the chat. My bad. We want to put them in the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them. But as many of the questions that come up in the Q&A are often answered in the webinar. So before you start to put 1,000 questions in the Q&A, follow along the webinar and it should answer most of your questions. So, all right, let's continue. So this is spring 2023, and most of you who are here are probably going to be May of 2023 graduates. So next slide. All right, so here's a few OPT basics. So the purpose of OPT is to apply knowledge gained in the classroom through practical work experience, because remember, OPT stands for optional practical training. And there's two types of OPT: pre-completion, meaning before graduation, and there's also post-completion, meaning after graduation. The OPT process is controlled by USCIS, not directly controlled by ISSS and Penn. Okay, next slide. All right, eligibility. So you must currently be in valid F1 status. That's a biggie. And you have to have completed at least one academic year. Now, we understand that some of you may have just been here since September of 2022, but you will complete your academic year in May of 2023. So if you're graduating in May, and you've been here since at least September of 2022, then that will be your academic year. And the other big one is you do not need a job to apply, because now in February, maybe you don't have an offer yet. Okay, next slide. All right, types of employment. So OPT, post-completion OPT, is quite flexible. And you can have, it could be paid or unpaid. So it could be volunteer. And any other type of legitimate unpaid work is permitted. You can have multiple jobs. You can have 2 or 3 jobs on OPT. You can change employers. And OPT is yours. So you are able to control that. You can change employers quite easily. As long as they're in your field of study, of course. And to be considered full-time on post-completion OPT, the job must be at least 20 hours per week. But potentially you could have 2 10-hour jobs or 2 15-hour jobs, and you'd have 30 hours. So you'd be considered full-time. So regular OPT is quite flexible. Next slide. Okay, work in the field of study. This is a really common question from students. They say, how do I know if this work is in my field of study? Well, the main guidance that immigration gives us is just that phrase right there. the employment must be directly related to your major field of study. And then students say, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, it really needs to be something that you and your employer can easily explain to a layperson or to immigration if you're ever asked about it. If it's not easy to make a clear explanation of how this job is related to my major, not your minor, your major at Penn, then that's where you want to have some red flags. If it's easily explainable, you're probably fine. It's in your field of study. And it really needs to be the major that's listed, or majors. You can have more than one major listed on your I-20 as what you're doing OPT with. Not classes you took or a minor, got to be your major. So there's a lot of resources to help you, but ISSS is definitely not an expert in all fields. We could give you some advice, whether it sounds like it's related to your field of study or not, but we cannot tell you exactly, because that's not up to us. That's really up to how immigration interprets it. So, next slide. So there's many steps to applying for OPT. And the first thing you've got to do is request it in IPEN. Okay, and we will enable that in a couple of weeks from now. We will open up the IPEN e-form. You can apply for OPT using the e-form. Your academic department has to confirm that. Then your DSO, that's your ISSS advisor, will recommend OPT. They'll make you a new I-20 with the OPT dates on the second page. And then it's going to be step 3 is your job. You need to file the I-765 form. And that's the government form that you do online to apply for OPT. Then step 4, then you're going to wait maybe 1 to 2 to 3 months for your card to come back. And then you'll get your EAD card or OPT card. EAD stands for Employment Authorization Document. And you're going to report in IPEN, you're going to report back to ISSS. I got my card, I got my job. My job starts on July 1st or June 20th or whatever that is. And then ISSS will record that in IPEN and in SIVIS. So there's a lot of steps here, but it's not that difficult. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's your timeline. And these are for May 2023 graduates. So this gives you, as I was saying, in about 2 weeks, we're going to open up the OPT applications. And then your program end date is graduation or commencement at Penn. And then July 14th is 60 days after graduation. So your OPT must be at least received by USCIS by July 14th. And your start date must be between May 15th and July 14th. That's the 60-day window of when you're going to ask for your OPT to begin, between May 15th and July 14th. And you have to pick that day, what it will be. You have to tell us what day you would like. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to start to take you into a little bit deeper into the process. Okay, next slide. All right, step 1, you're going to be able to go in here and requested an IPEN, not for another couple weeks, but we'll open it up. And you want to read the info on our website, complete the e-form and IPEN. Then your school, your academic department, is going to need to be the secondary approver. They're going to approve it, assuming you're on track for graduation, your grades are good enough, etc. And this is for, we're talking about post-completion OPT for May 2023 graduates. So you're going to have to pay the fee. You will pay that within IPEN with a credit card. And you will also have to watch the short tutorial video, which is similar to what we're doing now. But you're going to have to watch that again just to be sure that you really understand the process before you can apply for OPT. Okay, next slide. All right, then ISSS is going to get that request back. We're going to get that e-form, and you need to allow us, say, 3 to 5 business days, maybe 5 to 7 business days during the last 2 weeks of February or first 2 weeks of March, because that's when everybody's applying, right? We have thousands of students applying at the same time. So we will do our best to get to as many of those as we can, as quickly as we can. And we know that you're all really eager to apply for OPT, but please give us time to process them, because thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of students are all trying to apply between February 15th and March 15th, say. So we will issue you a new I-20 with OPT dates on the second page. We will send you that as a PDF. You need to print and sign the I-20, because it's got to have your signature on it too. It will have a signature from your ISSS advisor, and you need to sign it. And then next slide. Okay, step 3, you're going to apply with USCIS. And here's another big tip. You must be physically in the US when you do your I-765. Now it's electronic. It is a online form with immigration, but you need to be physically in the US at that time. So that's a biggie. So don't try to file for it when you're away on spring break. Do it either before you go or when you come back, because you need a new I-94 card, an active I-94 card, meaning that you're physically in the US in F1 status to apply for OPT. And you need to do it within 30 days of ISSS issuing you the new OPT I-20. Don't wait. When you get that I-20 from us, back from us, apply with USCIS immediately. Don't wait for 25 days before you do it, because you have a 30-day window that I-20 is valid to apply. We strongly recommend that everyone apply with the online version of the I-765. This is a relatively new process. This is really only I want to say the second year of it being fully online, and it's great. So definitely want to go for the online version. You can apply by mail, but we don't recommend it. Recommend the online version. Okay, next slide. So these are some good reasons to do online filing. Okay, there's no tipping fees. You can pay with a credit card. It helps you complete all the fields on the form, because it's an electronic form, so it will hold you up if you don't complete the fees. If you get a request for evidence from immigration, you can respond to them online. It's much better than mailing. when you apply online, you get a receipt number immediately. You don't need to wait for it to come by mail. There's no mailing or shipping issues with weather. It also offers you a review option, and the documents are the same, and the adjudication time, the time that USCIS takes to process, is the same, and if not faster, with the online version. So we're really encouraging the online application for an I-765. Okay, next slide. Okay, USCIS adjudication. So about 80% of the cases are done within 2 months. That's great news. They seem to be working very fast. We don't know how that will go this spring, but we're assuming it will continue to be relatively rapid. We're assuming that will continue to be good. You get a receipt number and a case number. You can check the status of your application using your case number online. And you definitely cannot engage in any employment or training while your OPT is pending. And USCIS may send you a request for evidence or an RFE. If you get an RFE, you definitely want to talk to your ISSS advisor about the RFE. It's very rare, to be honest. It's very rare, but it does happen. And we will help you if you get an RFE. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there's a sample of an EAD card. So see, it says employment authorization. This is just the generic card, but that's what an OPT card looks like, or EAD card. And there are many. OPT is one of the reasons that immigration issues EAD cards. So it's a generic card, but you are getting yours with the OPT process. Okay, next slide. All right, I think this is where we're going to switch over to my colleague Donna, and she will continue with the rest of the presentation.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my video back on. All right. Okay, so when can I start working? Some of the key things in regards to when you can start working is employment authorization is effective after you have the 3 criteria met. The first one is OPT is approved by USCIS, of course. Then you have the physical OPT card in hand. The picture that Jeremy showed you earlier is what the card would look like. Then whatever start date that you've been approved for has been reached. So if you have the card and the start date's July 1 and you get the card June 1, you have to wait till July 1 to start working. So in regards to the reporting, so the next step after you get the card, you are going to want to make sure you're starting to do OPT reporting and address updates within the IPEN system. So the following are what you need to make sure you're letting us know within a 10-day time frame. So any change to your legal name or address, so address is going to be the most common update that you're going to have. So within 10 days of moving, you want to make sure you're going into IPEN and submitting the address update e-form. That e-form also allows you to update your email address as well. Any changes to your status, or if you're going to leave and end OPT early, that could be done by the OPT reporting e-form in IPEN. And you're going to want to make sure that any changes to your employment is also updated within 10 days. When you add that first employer, when you leave them, start a new job, any of those updates you're always going to do within IPEN by submitting these e-forms. It's very important to make sure you're doing that so we have a history and a record of your employment, and it will be listed in the SEVIS system. There is another option to view. You want to always make sure you're doing IPEN, but the SEVP portal is also another option. And once your OPT is approved and usually closer to the start date, you're going to get an email to set that up. And it allows you to view the information and see this. You can make sure everything looks okay. But the key thing is that if you're locked out of the portal, we also have an e-form to request that to be reset. But the most important thing, as long as you're updating an IPEN, you're going to be fulfilling your immigration requirements. And one of the most important reasons that you want to make sure that you're doing your reporting and letting us know about any jobs that you do have is you need to be concerned about unemployment time, because the F1 status is dependent on how many days that you're not working while on OPT. So once you have the EAD and that start date on that EAD is when any days that you're not working will start accumulating. So over, for example, the first 12 months, you cannot have more than 90 days of unemployment. If you were to exceed that time, it would no longer allow you to remain in F1 status on OPT. So if you forget to do a reporting of your employment, you may show, it will show in the SEVIS record that you have, for example, let's say it's 100 days after your OPT started and you never let us know you started working for Google on August 1st, it's going to show that you have 100, negative 10 days of unemployment. So you need to be careful to make sure you're doing the reporting. And Jeremy went over all the options of employment. So there are various options to help not get to the point where you're looking at that 90 days. So you may also get notified by SEVP if you're not reporting the employment in the system, that's showing in the system. And there is a possibility that they could terminate a SEVIS record if it's showing as 90 or more days of unemployment if that's exceeded. So you need to be careful if they start to actually take action on records. That could affect your status. Okay, so everyone who had travel questions, I was trying to answer as many questions as possible, and Jeremy might be doing that right now. But if you have questions on travel, this is the best time to make sure to pay attention. So in certain cases, travel is not advised when you're applying for post-completion OPT. So while your application is pending, we are going to distinguish this before the end of your program. So if you're a May graduate before May 15th, or after your program end date, so after May 15th. So when you're actually applying for the OPT with USCIS, you need to be physically present in the US at the time you're filing. Once you know they've received your application, you can travel as you would with your normal F1 documents. You'll have a newly signed I-20 when you apply for OPT, as long as you have a valid F1 visa, your passport. So your normal F1 documents will allow you to travel as long as you decide to apply and they receipted and gave you a receipt number for your application. So that is usually not an issue, and it comes up. A common question we get is spring break. So if you're applying early, let's say mid-February, and you get the I-20 and you apply right away, you should be fine for any travel that occurs during spring break, as long as you have the other documents needed, of course. after your program end date, if the application's still pending, we don't recommend it. It's not prohibited, but it's not advised, because the possible risks are if you needed a visa. So if your F1 visa was expired, you're going to need the EAD in order to apply for a new F1 visa at the US consulate abroad. If your EAD is lost in the mail, you may be in a position where you can't try and find it. You can't go to your landlord, the post office, try and track down what happened to that EAD. So it's going to be much harder to do from outside the US than if you're here and able to check your mail yourself. That's an important thing that can and does come up. If you're denied, this is probably the worst case scenario of traveling after graduation while your OPT is pending, is that if you're denied or your OPT is rejected for any reason and you're outside the US and your program end date has passed, you're not going to be able to come back and apply again for OPT. Basically, you've lost that tether to your F1 status. And because you're no longer in a, if you were here and let's say it was denied within your grace period, then you could turn around and reapply. But if you've left the US, you no longer have a grace period and that ability. So that's kind of the worst case scenario. Also, if you have a deadline for your request for evidence, USCIS, and you're outside the US and you miss that, that's another issue. And also, sometimes we also hear about officers at the airport wanting to see the approval when you're coming back in. But again, these are risks, it's not prohibited. So you ultimately need to look at your own personal situation, what's happening travel-wise, restrictions, and make that decision whether it works for you with the understanding you may be taking on a potential risk when the OPT is still pending. Okay, so now your OPT has been approved and you got your EAD card. You want to make sure that if you have an employer, especially if they're planning to be applying for an H-1B on your behalf, that you're discussing your travel plans with them, because the H-1B process, and if they're changing your status, that can impact that process and the way that they file your application. So be sure to discuss that with them. But in general, if your OPT is approved and you're traveling, the key things to have: valid passport, you're still F1 status, so still having the valid F1 visa. This is a big difference. OPT signed for travel by ISSS within 6 months versus 12 months. So make sure that you're requesting a new I-20 with, that if your signature is going to be more than 6 months. Also, when you do that first OPT reporting, it's a good idea to ask for a new I-20, because especially if you are going to travel, because officers like to see that you have approved OPT. They look at that page too, and once your OPT is approved, they're going to see that on the I-20. So it's a good idea to request that new I-20 when you have the option to just do it all in that one e-form when you are reporting your employment, or just even reporting that you got your EAD. And the EAD is another thing that you will want to have with you, as well as proof of employment. And if you have, it's recommended, if it's not required, but if you have it, it's recommended to bring that information. Okay, I know a lot of you are very interested in STEM. We're going to do a little bit, just a brief overview of the OPT STEM extension. And just so you know, for what we have been discussing, that is for the 12 months of OPT that all students who are otherwise eligible to apply for OPT will be requesting. Your first application, for whether you're STEM or not, is for the 12 months. So those that are eligible for the STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, may be eligible to extend their OPT for an additional 24 months. So all of the steps and process are going to be outlined here, but this is something that you're going to be considering, let's say, a year from now. if you're graduating this May, I should say. So some of the fast facts in regards to STEM. So to be eligible when you're graduating, you have a STEM major. You are in a job at the time you're doing the STEM extension, not the regular OPT. Your employer is working with you to complete what is called a training plan, a Form I-983. The process itself is going to be very similar to applying for OPT. And as I mentioned, that I-983 is going to be an additional requirement that you will work with your employer to complete. So when? So 90 days before your OPT end date, so this 12 months you're applying for, 90 days before it expires, that's when you're going to be wanting to do the STEM extension. But you have to apply before your OPT end date. So as long as that's not expired and you're getting your application in before your last day of OPT, then you'll be okay. But you can't, even one day late, they're just not going to accept the application. So you want to keep that in mind. It's very important that you're doing reporting requirements. Again, IPEN is the place that you want to do these. You can still look at the portal, look at your information there, get updates from SCVP, but every 6 months, you're going to be doing a OPT reporting validation, confirming your address and your employment. 12-month evaluations will be done. So at the 12-month mark, you'll do a self-evaluation. At the 24-month mark, you'll do a self-evaluation. The only difference would be if let's say you ended a job earlier, then you're probably going to be doing that final evaluation for that job that you're ending while on STEM at that time, and then doing the next reporting according to the time cycle that you're on the STEM. And you're also going to be doing any changes in employment, contact information. So the I-983 is something you're going to always have on file for your employer and updating if there's any material changes to that. All right, I'm going to go through the CAP-GAP extension just to, so this is what CAP-GAP is basically, it's an option when you're at the end of your post-completion OPT or you're either, whether it's 12 months or if you have the full 12 plus 24 months at the end, and you're going to be starting an H-1B. The CAP-GAP can bridge the time between the end of the OPT and the start of the H-1B. So a lot of times there might be, so if an employer is filing a change of status for you and it's at the very end of your OPT eligibility, you will need that time filled in from, for example, let's say July till H-1Bs, which start October 1st, normally for the CAP subject employers. So this is an example. So you have OPT that ends on July 1. Your employer filed an H-1B petition during the acceptance period, and it was a change of status. It does need to be a change of status for October 1st. So once we know your application's been receipted by USCIS, your OPT will be extended to September 30th to allow you to keep working without break. And on October 1st, you basically will just change to H-1B. So your change of status will automatically take effect on the 1st of October, and then you'll be in H-1B status. If anything happens to your H, if it's denied, revoked, rejected for any reason, that does end your CAP-GAP authorization and benefits. Okay, so some frequently asked questions that we get. My OPT is more than 30 days old. May I use it to apply for OPT? Definitely not. You want to make sure if we give you an I-20 to apply for OPT and you're delayed for whatever reason, and it's about, it's going to be 30 days old at the time you're going to apply, do not use that I-20. You need to reach out to your ISS advisor to request a new I-20 to be issued. You don't have to go through the whole application e-form process again, but you would definitely want to make sure you reach out to them, because if you apply and your I-20s too old, they're going to they're not going to accept your application. You're going to be denied. So you want to make sure that you're not delaying the application, or if for some reason it's out of your hands and you do, that you reach out to your advisor. Do I need my EAD before beginning work? Yes. You need to have that EAD in hand, and it needs to have started before you start your position. Can I change my OPT request dates? Once you send the application to USCIS, those are the dates that you're going to need to stay with. If for some reason that you have a significant change before you mail your application to USCIS, reach out to your ISS advisor to go over if a change in OPT request dates. Can I cancel my OPT if I have not used it? Once it's approved, once you've mailed it to them and it's approved, you will not be able to cancel it. So even if you did not end up using it, it will be considered lost, like the OPT will be considered as being granted, and you won't be able to have it again at that degree level. So you kind of want to be very clear on your academic situation and your plans when you're applying, if there's any chance that you're going to need to make any changes. And again, if you're not sure and if it hasn't been sent yet, things like that, please reach out to ISSS. So if you've already used 12 months of OPT in one program, will I be eligible for another 12 months in another program? That is possible when you're doing a higher degree level. So if you finish your bachelor's, you do OPT, then you finish a master's, you will get another period of OPT. But if you do 12 months in one master's program and you're planning to do a second master's, you will not have another period of OPT if you used it for the first master's. And I think you mentioned immigration status on OPT, your F1. It's part of your F1. You're still under our sponsorship. It's a benefit of F1 student status. Okay, so definitely read the website. This video will eventually be posted. You're going to have access to lots of different information that's on there. Make sure you're organizing everything, plan ahead. Now you can just keep an electronic copies of all your documents, any applications you send, anything important just in general. You always want to make sure you're keeping your documentation so you know what you sent, even if it's just taking a screenshot before you submit the application. And keep reading our emails. It's really important to make sure you're reading our emails so you don't miss out on any important immigration updates that could affect, your status and staying in the US. And just remember, this is, we're providing guidance. This is not, if you have a situation that requires legal counsel, this is not a substitute. Okay. And this is our contact information. And I just want to we have a survey, which I want to put up as well.
With that, everybody have a good afternoon and be ready to apply for OPT in about 2 weeks.